Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, ask a friend to choose a Doctor Who story and their favourite things about it. I then have to watch, commentate along, see if I can guess what their favourite things are, and accentuate the positive, even with the Celestial Toymaker.
Hi Toby, thanks for having me on to talk about why I like the Celestial Toymaker.
Well, welcome everybody. That was the voice of Kieran Highman, who is a Doctor Who fan from New Zealand, who it's been a great pleasure for me to meet only on a handful of occasions at your sort of Doctor Who places of interest. And he's been an online presence, a presence I have enjoyed. He's very good at dressing up as different Doctor Who's. He's got what my partner Shez would call a nice energy. I like Kieran, and he's a sort of quietly eccentric person. You know how some eccentric people are sort of, not performatively eccentric, that's wrong, but outgoingly eccentric, whereas Kieran's, I think, is a sort of quieter, more contemplative eccentricity that I enjoy. He's also very creative with the cosplay and all of that, which is not my personal thing, but I admire creativity in all its forms, and I enjoy seeing people getting joy out of it. So, he's a good guy, as I say, who I've enjoyed my brief encounters with, and watching with and engaging with online. But so he didn't say his name there, and just briefly said what his choice was, which is the Celestial Toymaker. Now, this is interesting because the Celestial Toymaker, on the strength of the last time I sampled it, which was for Running Through Corridors, the book I did with Rob Shearman, so we're looking, over a decade ago, I was pretty confident it was the worst story of the 60s, if not of Doctor Who of all time, which was a real turnaround for me from my first feelings towards the story, which were that it was probably one of the very best. So it's been quite a journey for me that I will explain as we watch the episodes, because of course I have to accentuate the positive. That's what this is about. So this isn't going to be I am still going to try to accentuate the positive, but I thought I needed to get that out of the way at the beginning, and I'm doing this now because the Celestial Toymaker is about to return to our screens in the form of Doogie Howser MD, Neil Patrick Harris, who will always be Doogie Howser MD. I don't know the name of his character in How I Met Your Mother, although I did see the odd instalment of that, and of course he's Starship Troopers as well. But nonetheless, it's an actor's lot. He's Doogie Howser MD, which was shown in the sort of afternoons, early evenings when I was a teenager. And I remember it being a sort of permanent fixture off the telly. It also had James B. Sicking from Hill Street Blues in it, and Max Casella, who appears in a lot of Martin Scorsese films, and a chap called Marcus Redmond joined later in the series, and he popped up as a guest in at least one episode of Angel. Why did this? Now you see, I'm not a Doogie Howser MD fan. I'm just telling you what I remember and the little strands that it weaves throughout my very badly programmed brain that seems to remember things like I remember Marcus Redmond wasn't in it right from the beginning. In fact, I think he was a guest actor who then came back as a regular, and it's Marcus with a K. Why do I know? And as I say, I didn't keep a scrapbook on Doogie Howser or anything like that. It was just on sometimes. But anyway, he's the Celestial Toymaker now. That's not bad, because that's American, and American shows aren't really my thing either. But this Celestial Toymaker is, of course, the mighty Michael Gough, and thereby hangs a tale. So let's see how I cope, because I thought it was timely, and the way that these work is that for patrons, this is coming out at the around about the end of October, beginning of November 2023, as we approach the anniversary. For non-patrons, it might be out at about the time the animation of the Celestial Toymaker is about, or at least fresh in your minds. But I don't know, because I don't know when that's coming out, but they are talking about it at the moment. And I've done a little bit of consultation work on it, tiny bit, not as much as I do on some of the other ones. And so that's coming out at some point. So maybe the way these things work, this will be timely for everyone. Unlike I didn't check, this is the disadvantage, you see, of not, unlike my commentary on Fear Her, which I recorded before everyone had seen newsreader Hugh Edwards' Bottom, and released for non-patrons a little bit of time after, so it wasn't really in my head, and the brouhaha had sort of died down, but I make no mention of it whatsoever. And because he'd been sort of rather, I think, unfairly sort of dragged through the tabloids. Oh, not you too, Hugh. But you know, you would think in a, well, I wish I should have done a disclaimer at the top, but I sort of, you know, I put them to bed and I get them all nice and ready to go and load them all up so they go out automatically, and I hadn't thought. So apologies, non-patrons, that sometimes, occasionally, what you get is a little bit out of date. But I mean, people listen to podcasts at any old time anyway, so it's not like it's a scheduled broadcast. And if you do want it when it's scheduled, or when it's fresh, hot off the press, then you can do that for as little as £3 a month. So I think I think it's reasonable that I don't necessarily remember to go back and make sure that I'm doing, like old episodes of Job the Dead Donkey. When this was recorded, the following news presenters had not been dragged through the tabloids for various unfortunate, slightly saucy reasons. But anyway, that's all by the by. We are going to drag ourselves through one of those rare entries into Doctor Who's canon, a surreal story. It was sort of this and the Mind Robber, which I did relatively recently, were sort of bunched together as the sort of anomalous stories of each era, with a slightly sort of fairy tale, childhood, fantastical thing going on. So let's see how effective or not it might be. I am watching the Loose Cannon Recon, and and credit to them, because they do a fantastic job, especially as there are no telesnaps available of this story. But nonetheless, some beautiful photographs and really well put together by Loose Cannon. These recons, I particularly admire the ones that are telesnap free, but they're all superb, and they're all available. I was provided with mine by Steve Hatcher of the Derby Hoovers. He was my dealer, because you had to sort of send the tapes off, and then you'd get them back. And Steve was always very quick and very helpful. So thanks, Steve. And let's press play on the Celestial Toymaker in 3, 2, 1. Well, here we go. It's a missing episode. I remember the first time I heard of the Celestial Toymaker, I think, because it was one of those ones that wasn't novelised and I'd not read about anywhere or seen any pictures of, because I had very few issues of Doctor Who magazine. It was luck of the draw there. Celestial Toymaker I first heard about when it was practically the first page I opened it up on of the Radio Times 20th anniversary special. And there was a colour picture of Peter Purvis in this stripy top of his. I remember thinking, is that Peter Purvis from Blue Peter? I had no idea he'd been in Doctor Who, so that was quite exciting. And I think it's a picture of him looking quite cross with Clara and Joey behind him. And then there were various photos, quite a lot of colour photos of Celestial Toymaker. There's definitely one in the sort of story countdown. It's of the Toymaker, I think, in Sergeant Rugg and Mrs. Wiggs. But then quite a few photos of the Celestial Toymaker were around in publications. So I remember being surprised, although that will have also been in the Radio Times 20th anniversary special, to read that this story that had loads of photos in it photos of it existing, and really good-looking photos as well, a lot of them in full colour, was amongst those missing ones, because my brain hadn't quite go. I thought, well, if something is missing, it's totally sort of nebulous. The idea that they had, gone to the trouble of taking all these wonderful photographs of this thing, but also destroyed it, didn't compute to my young brain. Or I'm only talking split seconds here, but it seemed a surprise to me that something that I could see in such glorious colour, in such excellent quality photographs, was one of the missing stories. And it was, when I was a time tot, the Celestial Toymaker was totally missing, as were a lot of the sort of slightly strange, unreachable season 3 stories. I think maybe David Whittaker had written a couple of those early books, and the more famous stories of Hartnell's era seemed to be the first couple. In season 3, I'd never heard of Dodo and Stephen till I got that book, certainly not Sarah Kingdom and Katerina. So season 3 seemed quite mysterious anyway, and then you read that list of the dead, the stories that didn't exist anymore, and it was for Hartnell it was mostly season 3. And I still think it's a fascinating period of the show. I think John Wiles and Donald Tosh were clearly ambitious to do sort of intelligent science fiction that had, I think, quite lofty ambitions in terms of the mixture of styles, bringing in Donald Cotton to do sort of spoof historicals, as well as, then having John Lucarotti doing a really downbeat, doom-laden one. But then with the science, I think the arc is tremendously ambitious in terms of its, scope and ideas. And then you have this, which is, this is obviously not the version that Wiles and Tosh had envisaged. It's been sort of burglarized by Jerry Davis, I think, and it's a shame that although we have a lot of Brian Hales's paperwork, we don't have his original version of the Celestial Toymaker, which featured the characters of George and Margaret from a play by Gerald Savory, who was a BBC head of drama and but wrote this play, and it's about two characters that never turn up, isn't it? A bit like Waiting for Godot. He could have had Godot, I suppose, or President Zarb, or any of the other great, oft referred to but never seen fictional characters. The Graf in Decay's brother. So I think this is a, who knows what the original would have been like, and perhaps it would have been impenetrable, nonsensical, and too strange. This, of course, has this wonderful, I think this is a brilliant opening. The Doctor's been made invisible, making the Doctor intangible, sort of takes away his power, which which suggests that this is an enemy with powers beyond those of normal beings. And I like that, the idea that the Toymaker seems to exist out of our sort of our physical realm, already makes him sort of godlike and potentially more threatening than anybody we've met before. The casting of a genuine A-list actor, Michael Gough, he gets and featuring Michael Gough as the Toymaker credit in the Radio Times. It's very interesting. The Radio Times actually doesn't give the cast list in the way that one would expect, and we don't have the production file, so we don't actually know for sure what order the credits were in for episodes 1 to 3. Did they do them in order of appearance as some? Did they do them in order of star billing as others? In order of appearance was usual for the Hartnell era. After the Doctor, everyone in order of appearance, but not always. So, but that's the sort of thing that only people who remember when actors came in late into the season of a series they're not even a fan of, and what episode, whether they appeared in Angel or not. But anyway, let's not get into that. This so there's the series of TARDISes, which I think has been obviously reimagined and redone by loose cannon, but very well. But I always think in these early stories there's something particularly terrifying about losing access to the TARDIS. You get a real sense of being marooned, I think, in the early years where where the TARDIS doesn't, and Doctor Who doesn't really return to 20th century Earth, is that the only thing that can get you out of where you are is the TARDIS, and it's and staying having that as your anchor is really important, and having that anchor takes you away, leaves you adrift in a world of danger. And that was the picture of Stephen looking cross. I love, obviously, there's something brilliant about clowns being scary, and I mean, I love this whole setup. I think the giant doll's house is a magnificent set, and I think it's a superb idea to take childhood things and to make them terrifying and abstract and scary. And I think that is a great and really bold innovation for the series, to say, well, let's take childhood games and turn them into nightmarish versions of, grotesque, overgrown parodies of what they are. So you have large, and the clown makeup is excellent. And I was very pleased when I don't think I realised. I think I noticed that Carmen Silvera was the Queen of Hearts, and then I think I must have worked out that actually, right, they play all the people. But I noticed that Carmen Silvera was the lady off of Allo Allo, and I was very pleased. It was one of my early actor spots, and it's a great idea having Carmen Silvera and Campbell Singer playing all of the different parts. That, I think, adds to the lovely sort of abstract nightmare world, that everyone is played by a sort of version of this small bevy of players. Like they have a sort of rep company for the whole story. The production file doesn't exist, but I suspect they were probably hired for all 4 episodes, and then when the script completely changed, it was just like, well, okay, well, it's just, we're going to have to write it that it has this makeup of characters, including a man and a woman, and maybe they got paid for episode 4 and didn't. Now, actually, it might be worth looking at their files in the BBC Written Archive. Anyway, don't think out loud, Toby, but it would be a small thing to learn. But then again, I've travelled down to Reading or wherever it is to discover less, and packed friends off as well who've been doing other research projects. God, can you just look in this file for me so I don't have to go all the way just to check it myself? Michael Gough is was a fabulous actor, and a big name. I love the robot as well. I love the design work of this, actually. There is nothing in his delivery. He has this delivery that he does. He's got a slightly feline look about him, I think, Michael Gough. A sort of Cheshire Cat smile that he has. And that delivery that he has, that slightly spiky, again, he's like a Cheshire Cat smile with a stray cat's bite. But yes, it is a very feline look. What he is not in is Yellowface, and I'm going to dispense with this fairly quickly. I understand and I respect, and indeed I support the desire to call out racism wherever one sees it. I absolutely abhor the desire to force the past to account for itself with the lofty arrogance of people who have a toaster but don't know how it was built, and behaving as if the toaster only works because of everything you've done, and certainly that desire to look back at the past and to see prejudice where there was none, or to say, it's not right to say, it's no excuse to say it was a different time. Yeah, it was an excuse, because context is everything. If you don't understand conversation and interaction without the nuance of context, then I think you're daft, and overly censorious and overly keen to take the moral high ground in a land that you don't understand the geography of. But certainly in this case, it's unfortunate that he's got a costume that Mark Eden also wore in Marco Polo, but that's probably because they wanted a costume that looked quite fancy and that fit Michael Gough. He's certainly not putting on a Chinese voice. He's certainly not in Yellowface. And yes, of course, some clever so-and-so went, oh, hang on, I've read a thing where the celestial can mean Chinese. Yeah, it can also mean of the stars. And seeing as it's called the Celestial Toy Room this episode, it's not a Chinese toy room, is it? They mean celestial as of the stars. I am all for looking over problematic representations of race and things in the past and going, what can we learn from this? I'm not all for pointing out that something is problematic for the sake of making us feel better about the world we live in, or indeed about ourselves in the world that we live in, because we like to be. Anyway, no. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to ad hominem people that I've made up in my head, but this desire of ours to make the past account for itself, even for crimes that it hasn't committed, is one that I think we expend far too much energy on, and I have expended far too much energy on it. I see no intent at Chinese representation in the Celestial Toymaker. I think he is a figure from the stars, a godlike figure from another realm who happens to be wearing a costume from BBC stock or Berman's and Nathan's that is elaborate and suits the actor. But I don't think it's supposed to suggest anything particularly Chinese, but more stellar. And certainly, and this has been suggested, there's nothing in Michael Gough's performance that suggests that. He does have a slightly strange delivery, especially when he's saying "go from move," but that's he puts on a different voice to instruct the trilogic game to move. Now, of course, we have Hartnell here, who keeps being made invisible, which is really unkind, and it is, John Wiles. You get the impression, was punishing Hartnell throughout the course of, he appears quite late in some episodes of Dalek Master Plan. He's not in that even when he's the abbot in the massacre. I mean, he's only in the reprise of episode 2. The abbot's not in the massacre by that much at all, and Hartnell's not in the massacre that much at all. Now, I know this is now Innes Lloyd and Jerry Davis, but it's obviously, it had its genesis in the Wiles and Tosh era, and is, I think, as I say, at this stage, it's a really interesting premise. I think taking us to a world where the same rules, although we'll get on to the rules shortly, don't apply, is a bold use of the format. And I find it totally refreshing. And I find it really interesting having Hartnell, the most sort of... Well, no, I was going to say, no, actually, he's not the most down-to-earth sort of doctor, but certainly one that you don't expect to be dilly-dallying with surrealism, perhaps in a way that I think other doctors might be able to. But he seems totally, at home in this world, and he's giving Gough the status he deserves. This is definitely, and it's in the writing as well, this is a villain cut from a different cloth. Well, not a different cloth from Mark Eden when he played Marco Polo, but you know what I mean. Cut from a different cloth. Talking of cloth, actually, I like the design in this is excellent. The costumes and the sets. I like Stephen's stripy top, and I like Dodo's spotty t-shirt and skirt combo. They're stripes and spots, so they must never go together, because apparently you can't wear stripes and spots together, I've been told. I don't know the rules. Now, and the music is doing work here. It's sort of played. There's a lot of it's percussive, isn't it? So it's quite sort of woody and clumpy. It sounds like it's been played by the contents of a toy box, or those instruments that you got out of the percussion box at school, like the clippity cloppity things, those and the guiro and those sorts of things. And there's a bit of xylophone in there, but it sounds like it's sort of played by toys from or stuff from the nursery, or from the early days of when you learnt to play musical instruments as a kid. It's a great regret of mine that I never learned to play an instrument properly, but I remember those music lessons where you got out the sleigh bells and the maracas and the bongos and this feels like it's it's been assembled from that sort of area, which adds to the sort of infant school feel, which I think is great and admirable. And the trilogic game is a slightly weird thing. which I know that Peter Purvis took the prop home with him. And didn't work for a year, and then threw it away. And the next day got an episode of Z-Cars, or So the Law Goes, or something like that. And Michael Gough was, of course, married to Annika Wills at this time, who very shortly goes on to appear as Polly, the Doctor's companion. And the Doctor's hand, which has been very well rendered in some form of CGI here. The trilogic game is a sort of computer-generated thing here by Loose Cannon. Well done, them. And of course they do have the footage from episode 4, so they can have stills of some of the characters, but not, of course, of Carmen Silvera and Campbell Singer, who play 3 different parts throughout the 3 episodes, so but are not in episode 4, so have had to be entirely rendered through still pictures or composites or whatever. So it's a terrific job. I do like the dinky robot that keeps popping up behind everybody. My son gave me a robot a bit like that. You can get them as not a Doctor Who piece of merchandise, but they're sort of toys that come in a box, and they say this is not a toy. You know, it's a collector's item. And we've got one on the Welsh dresser, along with about 12 TARDISes and a couple of Daleks, and a picture of Chez's mum, just so that it's not entirely Doctor Who. But I love that robot. I think it's a perfect piece of design. And of course, it's got a telly in it, so it's like a sort of early, non-organic Teletubby. Maybe the Teletubbies are like Cybertubbies, and they evolved yellow, red, purple, and green skin around that robot, and that if you skinned a Teletubby, you would find that robot inside as its inner skeleton. That's my fiction for the day that I'm sticking with. But this is where we start, I think, with some of the Celestial Toymakers' issues, is that they've come up with this idea of deadly, nightmarish versions of kids' games. But then we have to play them, and I'm not sure there's... As somebody that was the youngest of 4, that quite often you'd go around to people's houses and everybody would be playing on a computer game, and everyone would get a turn except me, and I'd just have to watch other people playing it. I've never understood the joy of watching other people playing a thing. And then when my kids have sort of been on YouTube and watch other people playing a thing, I'm like, God, I was forced to do this as a kid. I certainly wouldn't seek it out as entertainment. Now that the entire universe of knowledge, information, and entertainment is at my fingertips, this is what you've chosen. I look forward to Stephen unboxing something in the next episode. The 2 strangest internet pastimes that I can think of. So Loose Cannon, I think, have got a body double for Stephen here to recreate what is quite a tricky watch for the modern viewer that doesn't have the moving episodes to hand, which is all of us. Is that they're basically playing Blind Man's Bluff, isn't it? And Blind Man's Buff, I think, it's an entirely different thing. I do like the clown makeup, and Campbell Singer looks fantastic, and good for him. Poor chap. He's quite experienced and respected actor who is playing a part with precisely no lines whatsoever. But those they do look like, having clowns that are dangerous. Although these aren't, it's not quite the same vibe as the chief clown in Greatest Show in the Galaxy, but it's nonetheless, it's a bold thing for a kids' tea time show to put menace in something that is usually entertaining, like, a board game and a couple of clowns. But I think the staging of it, obviously, again, we can't say the depiction of it, the dramatizing of it, I think relies on a lot of sort of action that doesn't feel particularly dangerous or threatening, and of course, but I like this bit where Dodo grabs Clara and she goes limp like a ragdoll, and I can imagine if that was acted well by Carmen Silvera, that would have been quite sort of creepy and abstract and weird, and I'll probably be using the word abstract quite a lot during this, but I think this is where this adventure works best. My worry on the strength of episode 4 is that abstraction is quite muted, or indeed everything is done rather literally. It's difficult to tell because episode 4 is a slightly different beast from the first 3 as well. So I still don't think we've quite got the angle on the story that we would have had we had it all. But I still admire, definitely, the ambition of the concept. I just think, and again, we've got no proof of this because we don't know what Brian Hale's original scripts were like. But the idea that it's been sort of whittled down to, okay, well, we just do literal, actual versions where we're the pieces of board games. And then we get this bit, which is, oh, and the Toymakers people cheat. You go, well, okay, what's the logic of that then? What's the point? If they're going to cheat, why are we playing the games? Well, maybe that's the point, that he's just a sadist, and he the whole point of it is the games are just him toying with us in order to entertain himself as we futilely fight against him. Is that the vibe that we're getting? Is it that I've noticed that I used to tell myself off for saying interesting too much. I use the word vibe too much now, and it's not really a me sort of word, and it's quite a dated word already, and it's not a word I've used, I think, prior to this year. Now I say it quite a lot, and that gives me bad vibes, everybody, because I sometimes get that with a word where I use it once and go, oh, that's suitable for that sentence, and then I use it for a number of sentences for which it is entirely unsuitable, and after a while, very repetitive. But so I want you to know, if you cringe every time I say vibe, a little part of me inside dies when I do it as well. So at least we're all going together. But yes, the whole thing is that they cheat, don't they? The Toymakers pawns, in which case, and they are pawns literally, in which case, what's the point? But you could say, well, that is the point. And there is a certain sadness in the fact that because all the playthings are sort of quite likeable, in that, when Stephen and Dodo win, Clara collapses there and, is obviously returns to her toy-like state. And again, that depends on how well that was done. If the actress just slumps over, but if she suddenly looks like a sort of grotesque parody of the human form, half dead body, half discarded toy, that would be really interesting. Depends how it's shot, depends how it's played, depends how it's how they think of it in those terms. But you don't really get that from the script particularly. I think there could be more, whatever these creatures are, they were once human, and they've got vestiges of that within, and there's a tragedy to them being the Toymakers' playthings. And a curious episode endings, it ends with them sort of going off to play the next game. But I love this. I love the fact that you have 4 legs, no feet, of arms, no lack, blah, blah, blah. You have the little verse before the closing credits, and we do know that. But we do know that it had that. So I think that's nice. Anything that makes the credits have something noteworthy or unique, I think is particularly fun. Unique to this episode is, of course, the name Bill Sellers at the end of the credits. He'd never done a recorded interview about Doctor Who until I got him for Who's Round, and I wrote to him and was totally surprised that he replied, because he'd never done he had been interviewed by Richard Marson for his John Nathan Turner book, but he'd only ever once done a talk about Doctor Who, and he I mean, I think he exaggerated, because he said he'd done a talk. It was for a thing John Nathan Turner had organised, and he said he hadn't really liked Doctor Who, and he got chased out of the building and almost killed by the fans. Now, Doctor Who fans might might occasionally get overly pedantic, but I don't think they'd form a lynch mob if for suggesting that, for a director suggesting he didn't really like it much. But anyway, I interviewed him, and he remembered very little about the Celestial Toymaker, and actually it was one of those interviews where some of the stuff he did remember I knew was incorrect. And I'm sorry to say that if some people might go, well, hang on, if he remembers it, how do you know? Because I know that he didn't not work with William Hartnell and Michael Gough. He said, I didn't really, they all did their stuff on film before, you see, so I didn't really meet them. It's like, no, they didn't. And that was pretty much all he remembered, which was not true. It's not the only time I've interviewed somebody about Doctor Who where the only thing they remembered is something that is demonstrably untrue and immediately disprovable. But there we go. But anyway, it was nice to go to his house, and he lived at the time with his wife Berger off of Earthshock, who he'd been married to in the 60s, and then Bill had gone off and lived with his partner Douglas in sort of in a cave in Spain, I think. And then Douglas had sadly died, and Bill was very upset about that. It was rather sad at the end of the interview. He sort of got me pictures out and showed me, and was clearly still terribly moved, but had moved back in with June, and they'd got married again. And they are the grandparents of a comic I know called Jordan Brooks. And really weirdly, I didn't know that. And Jordan came to play XS Malarkey not long before. And I think it was such a coincidence that I'd never worked with Jordan before, and he came to play XS Malarkey, my comedy club. And it came up that his granddad had directed Doctor Who, and I was like, I'm actually going to interview him like next week. I mean, of all the weeks that it would have happened. Jordan's an extremely successful comic now. He was quite new at the time, so that was one of those lovely sort of weird, strange coincidences. And anyway, June, Berger from Earthshock, and Elizabeth Rowlinson from Battlefield, who was in The Newcomers that Bill was also worked on. In fact, I've got a big cast and crew picture with Bill in the middle that crops up somewhere. Where did I get that from? Oh, I may have got it from Paddy Russell. I can't remember. Anyway, I need to go through all my stuff in the office. I've got all sorts of things flying about. So Bill Sellers only Doctor Who, so we don't have a lot to compare it with. John Wood was an interesting designer. John, I discovered, sadly passed away at Christmas, which was a shame, because he does appear on some of the DVDs, but I think we could have benefited with a proper old chat with John. I met his grandson recently, who was pleased that John was remembered, and he was a very interesting designer who got some of Doctor Who's stranger commissions in a way. He got the Web Planet. He does the spaceship stuff on the Space Pirates, doesn't he? And he does the Mythmakers. He designed the Trojan Horse. So that horse is one of the few surviving things from the 60s. So his work still survives, which is lovely. And the Celestial Toymaker. And I have to say, I think the design is one of the strongest elements of that first episode. I mean, I think it's tricky because it's limited in what the story is. The trilogic game is never going to be hugely visually interesting, especially when in the next two episodes when your leading man is sent away on holiday, and his hand is played by actor Albert Ward. He seems to have been the go-to man to play Williams Hartnell's hands. It's not the only time he does it, and some of those enlarged board games are not that interesting looking. They can only ever be just bigger versions of it. But I think the Giant Doll's House is fantastic. I think the various bits of set dressings that evoke this sort of overblown, sort of parodic giant toy box thing. I said thing there instead of vibe. Is one of the stronger elements of this. Obviously, I mean, the cast are all great, and it's a high-end cast, really. But for me and the music is excellent. But for me, the first thing, and I think that episode is actually pretty good. I get a bit, and it's hard because we can't see what's going on. But the actual playing of the game is already a bit tedious, I feel, and I think it's partially because I know we've now got 3 episodes of Dodo going, "Oh, Stephen, isn't this fun?" And Dodo going, "Remember that it's dangerous, though, Dodo." And that's my main memory of this story, is of Dodo not twigging and Stephen being a very, Peter Purvis doing his best in the face of, what is quite strangely tedious goings on. Because at the end of the day, a board game is a board game, and there's a reason we play Call of Duty now. Now, you could do a grotesque version of Snakes and Ladders, or any other sort of board game that was grotesque and overblown and had darkness and creatures and all sorts of other things. This isn't that. Even even if they were able to do size, which they can't, the Doll's House is amazing. But if it had been a giant, blind man's buffalo, absolutely massive, dwarfing them, that would have been interesting, and a sort of, again, a terrifying, where our things in childhood that were small then and look normal size to us, and as we get bigger look sort of tiny. It's like when you go back to school and you see the chairs and go, "Did I sit in chairs that small?" Well, if you reverse that and suddenly had those things towering over you, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? But that isn't that. It's them playing to Campbell Singer and Carmen Silvera in having a whale of a time doing different characterizations, but essentially playing people who cheat at these games that they play, and then having to go, "Oh, well, hang on, we're going to have to do it again because you cheated," and actually the playing of the games is not huge, and it never feels massively threatening. I think there could have been darker and more innate sort of menace. But its ambitions are right. I think it takes Doctor Who out of its comfort zone. I think it's a bold use of the format, and I think the Toymaker is a character with great potential that's never really, I think, been fully realised. I remember getting the Nightmare Fair and thinking, "Oh, and this would have been amazing," then reading the book and going, "Oh, no, maybe it wouldn't have done." So it's with interest that I watch, because even that visual of the cards, and I love the book cover of the Celestial Toymaker, actually, that visual of the cards flying that is on the publicity picture that's just recently been released with Neil Patrick Harris and David Tennant and Catherine Tate, and lots of playing cards flying towards us. What brilliant potential that character has. I love that idea of taking things from our childhood and taking an innocent pastime like a game and making it dangerous and threatening and spooky. And so I think my favourite thing of episode 1 is it's what the story is. This imaginative, different realm. This idea of, we've gone backwards in time, we've gone forwards in time, we've done comedy historical, we've done pure historical, we've done science fiction adventure, we've done thoughtful futuristic science fiction, we've done sort of doom-laden comic strippy action adventure science fiction of the Terry Nation type. We've even done comedy science fiction, but we've never done strange abstract fantasy. And so for that, I think the Celestial Toymaker deserves a lot of praise and a lot of celebration. So for me, this could really be my thing for the whole adventure, but I'm going to take what I can get as I get it. And for me, what seems most apparent about this story, from the minute the Doctor goes invisible and has even his physical presence taken away from him, which again at this stage in proceedings, and I think for the show in the 60s, is a really alarming and terrifying idea that the Doctor could lose his body at any moment and being disembodied, be incapable of doing anything. It's a bit like Omega, isn't he? Where he's got, he's just got the force of his mind left. That's a really strange and unsettling idea. And then, you've got Dodo and Stephen separated from the Doctor and needing to get to the TARDIS, but the TARDIS has been taken away and there's lots of empty ones. And, you go to what you think is your sanctuary of the TARDIS and there it's empty. Oh, that's all quite powerful stuff, I think, especially in the 60s when we took, I think, the TARDIS and being able to get back to it and away from where we were a lot less for granted, and where we felt less anchored to the Earth, which I think, inevitably Doctor Who, as it goes on later, kind of does, So, yeah, I think it's the very concept, the idea, the stretching of the series format, the whole nightmarish version of childhood and childhood games, and the concept of the Toymaker's character. So I think if Kieran's anywhere near that ballpark, because that was quite all encompassing. But I think you know what I mean. Let's see what Kieran says.
The first thing I like about Celestial Toymaker is the concept of the villain Toymaker. I always love this idea of a godlike being who can do anything that he chooses and decides to spend eternity just playing games, you know. And it probably appealed to me as a kid as well, because it sounds like the sort of thing that I'd do at that age. And reminds me of Q from Star Trek, who I always liked. So I think this idea of an omnipotent being who can use their powers on anything and they choose to spend it on nonsense and mischief just really appeals to me for some reason, you know.
Yeah, that. Well, I think I can get the point for that. Kieran, by the way, is sitting in front of a poster that I had, which was from Doctor Who magazine, which is of Goff in his chair. There's a yellow stripe along the top with, I think, the DWM logo, and it's full colour. There's some gorgeous full colour photos of the Celestial Toymaker, and yeah, the concept of the villain, I think, is part of. I think I get a point for that. Look, I never win. I'm not going to win this, partially because it's going to be really hard for me to choose things about the Celestial Toymaker, because I pretty much the next 2 episodes really hate. This is going to be interesting. So I'm going to have that one. Just what the story is, the concept, and the concept of the villain, I think, is an important part of that. Do I have that? Well, it's up to you. Look, I'm not going to win. Full stop. I'm not going to win happy times and places. I think I've won one in, what are we on now? Is this number 87? I've just slightly changed the order because I've not done the story I was going to do next. I think we're on 78. I think something like that. 79. So I'm unlikely to claw this back. As I record this, I stand as much chance as England do of getting to the semi-finals of the Cricket World Cup, One Day World Cup in India, and mathematically they stand a chance, but in actuality they don't. I don't think I even stand a chance mathematically. But I was a born loser, so I may as well come up with the podcast in which I'm inherently doomed to fail. So do you know what? I'm making no apology for having that point, because this one's going to be tough for me. Although I have to say, because it's one I'm not particularly familiar with, and so what I did was I did actually watch the episode last night without having to commentate through it, because I want to at least be as informed as I can. I found I remembered much. I know it because I'm familiar with all classic Who to a certain extent. More familiar with it than I am with Doogie Howser, and I could pass muster on that. But I thought, well, actually, why not watch an episode for enjoyment as well, but with an eye on the fact that I will be doing a commentary on it tomorrow. And I watched it quite late at night last night. And yeah, that sort of strangeness really did appeal. But I know, I was thinking, and obviously in context as well, going from one story to the other, this would have seemed like a real contrast to anything that had gone before it. But I also know, when I did it running through corridors, when I watched the series in order, I found this one really tricky, particularly the next 2 episodes. So we've got those to come, everybody. But we're all in this together. And as I say, I'm going to try to accentuate the positive. And I know some people think I should, slate things a little bit more. But I go into these always I like creativity. I like people who spend their time making things and trying to be entertaining. And I love Doctor Who, and I love the trivia and the history of Doctor Who, and I love the people who made Doctor Who. So, I don't find it easy to dismiss things, even something. And I don't. I mean, that's not to say, I was going to say, I don't particularly enjoy being down and stuff. Actually, we all quite like, don't we, having a go at something. There's something cathartic about, whinging about something we don't like, and it does, and it's not, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not aimed at the people that made the thing we don't like either. It's just a cathartic act. It's a human act. But I see a lot of negativity out there, and I don't think it does me any good. So I feel that instead of contributing to the negativity, I should at least try and provide some positivity. But I might not necessarily always succeed. And that's not to say people can't be entertainingly excoriating. There's nothing better than reading a terrible review of something written by somebody who's a powerful slayer. But I prefer to rhapsodize Arcana, to do a symphony of trivia, and to celebrate. Because there was a time in my life, flicking through that Radio Times 20th anniversary special, where the Celestial Toymaker seemed the most magical thing. The Doctor Who did stories like this in the old days. Imagine what a show it must have been. And that magic is still sprinkled over those pictures as I conjure them in my mind. I've got half a mind to go and look through that Radio Times 20th anniversary special. I haven't read it for years and years and years, but I used to know every word of it. And gosh, it was a gorgeous collection. Beautiful, beautiful pictures. Yeah. And I chopped up one and stuck and decoupaged a folder with it. Oh, you idiot. And the other one was so raggedy and red. But anyway, my friend Peter has since given me a pristine copy. So I'm very lucky in that regard. Anyway, that is episode 1 of the Celestial Toymaker. I hope you've enjoyed listening. I really do. Go away now and come back for episode 2. There we go. I've ended it on the shit rhyme. Ha 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 ha. Happy times and places to you all. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Kieran Highman, who can be found on Instagram at HymanKieran. I'm grateful to him and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, P. Baker, Sarah Krotzer, Steve Walker, Michael Harvey, David Brody, John Molyneux, Jim Trenowden, Man in a Skirt Alert, Paul Jones, Angus Gulliver, Julian Bashford, Graham, Matthew Harris, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Jenny at Blue Box 99, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelp, Paul Dunn, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore and Kevin Murdoch. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Well, if you would like to be a patron and have your name read out on the closing credits like that, then you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Entry starts at as little as £3 a month, and that gets you your name read out on the credits at various intervals, plus access to all of the audio and visual material. There are things that drag you higher up the tiers, but I was going to say none of them are really worth it. But they're trinkets, really. It's a pay what you can. That seems like a nice system, doesn't it? Pay what you can compared to what you feel willing to shell out. And you get releases 6 months in advance. You get some exclusive releases. You get bonus material. You get 3 things a week plus pictures of my dog, which count as a 4th, and the occasional additional one as well, depending if I'm in the giving vein. But generally you get three releases a week, or certainly a couple of hours worth of material at least. And that's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. And it's quite fun there, but I know that many people don't want to be tied to a monthly obligation. You can instead go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke and just throw a few coins into my cyber hat if you so desire. You don't get any bonuses there, but it's another way of subsidizing creatives, and this is how we do it these days. And one day I will stop saying that, yes, one day, and get over myself. But it still seems a little strange, but I don't mind doing it. It's the way we hustle, don't we? That's what we have to do. But I try to provide what I hope is decent value if you like listening to a man talking about Doctor Who. I mean, I've bought a theme tune. It's edited. I've got a proper microphone. And yeah, hopefully the content's all right as well. But yeah, patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, Ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. What I could really do with, though, if money is not your thing, and it doesn't have to be, because all this stuff is available for free. If you're not a patron, you are listening to this free at the point of contact. But what costs you nothing but a little of your time and would receive my eternal gratitude is a 5-star review on any of the podcast disseminating platforms, and a few lines as well. 5-star rating, a few lines of review. And if you could like and subscribe and do all those sorts of things, that really helps with my algorithms and, improves the performance of this in terms of visibility. And that really sort of justifies me doing this right now, when I should perhaps be doing something helpful to somebody somewhere, either that I know or to my wider career as a writer, actor and stand-up comedian. But instead I'm talking about Doctor Who for coppers, which is my great pleasure. But if it's your pleasure to listen, if you could please make that known in various avenues, I'd be grateful. You can also follow me on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. I also have a Facebook page, Toby Hadoke, not me, which is where I advertise all of my professional wares. And I'm on Instagram at toby.hadoke, where I'm just learning how to do videos and things like that. And I would like you to follow me there, because I sort of overperform, I think, on Twitter without having really tried. But I think I underperform on Instagram. And quite often now people get jobs in my business depending on the amount of Instagram followers they have. So even if you don't want to look at my pictures, just a follow would be helpful, because it might be the difference between me getting a role in Emmerdale Farm or not. I don't think it's called Emmerdale Farm anymore. Anyway, yeah, go on, do that. Follow me in those places and do all the social media stuff. And if you like what I say, you might like what I say when I'm not saying anything about Doctor Who, because I am a stand-up comedian of over 25 years standing, and I run a comedy club, XS Malarkey, at XS Malarkey on Twitter, and that is every Tuesday in Manchester. I will also run a monthly new material night, and so if you want to come and see me live in Manchester, last Sunday of the month or every Tuesday are my regular haunts, and it would be great to see you there. And not everything I say is about Doctor Who. As I say, I take usually a few hours off on a Sunday and a Tuesday. The rest of the time, 100%. And actually, I sometimes talk about Doctor Who on stage on a Sunday and a Tuesday, so no, it's most of the time. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about Doctor Who now. I normally do a bit at the end, but I've got loads to do. I've still got to finish writing my radio show for the 60th anniversary, which has gone up on the BBC Sounds or wherever, or on iPlayer or whatever it is. Saying that it's on when it's on, which is very interesting because it currently doesn't exist, not even in word form. Well, episode 1 is 1,000 words too long, and episode 2 isn't finished. So I should be doing that instead of this. So I'm now going to stop doing this to go and do that.